Center for Arizona Policy, the group who has famously criminalized abortions in the state of Arizona. What led you to start that effort?
I think everyone's a little bit stunned that the state constitution has moved in a direction where every life is not protected in the law.
The American family is making a comeback.
The other superpowers of the earth, be they historic or current, they're not concerned like we are about, did the right decision get made at the local level?
Peter, Center for Arizona Policy, the group who has famously criminalized abortions in the state of Arizona. What led you guys to start that effort?
Well, abortion, of course, is something that has always been treated since before Arizona was a state as a very, very serious social issue and even a crime. So our focus is that every single person deserves life. You can't have life, liberty, and happiness without life. So it's about the pursuit of happiness, and that means everybody has the ability, the right to have life. And what makes this moment right now for Arizona so significant is, and I know you know this, we have for the very first time in our state constitution a right to abortion that's been addressed. It's been adopted by a majority of the voters, and as we enter the 250th anniversary of the United States, our contention is that right, that so-called right that's in our state constitution, is totally inconsistent with what the Declaration of Independence says, that we all have that right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it's not a question of will that be taken out of our state constitution. It's a question of when. And that'll happen fundamentally when our community, our state, wants to protect every person in the law and welcome every person in life.
It's fascinating to me, this debate going on right now about the sanctity of life, because in the early 1800s, this was an issue. New York and Connecticut were among the first states to actually ban abortions. And here we are 100 years later, and we're having that same conversation. Do you think this is something the founders intended us to debate on so many years later?
Would they be surprised by the debate? I think so. Just the question of is every life worth protecting? I don't think that was in doubt at the time of the founding. Mm-hmm. Now, there were obviously inconsistencies, and the parallels between what our country is going through now and what our country struggled with when it came terms to just making sure that every life was protected in the law and given freedom. Obviously, our country endured, protected, promoted slavery for a long period of time, and that was inconsistent with the Declaration of Independence as well. One of my favorite speeches, one of the most significant speeches that's ever been given, is Frederick Douglass's "What is the 4th of July to a slave?" And what he's doing is he's holding up a mirror to our country and saying, "How can you celebrate the 4th of July when you are allowing slavery to take place here? Isn't this fundamentally inconsistent?" And he's asking that question of Americans. He's asking that question of Christians. We hear a lot about, and we focus on religious liberty. At Center for Arizona Policy, we're laser focused on making sure that every person has the ability to live, to work, to learn, and do that in a way where they are discharging their primary duties to God first. Religious liberty, it's a core tenet. Well, what Frederick Douglass said was, religious liberty, that's under attack in a country where you could have part of the country enslaved. Isn't that a complete attack on religious liberty? It's a very challenging phrase, but it's poignant for our time as well.
Peter, kind of going down that line of religious liberty and staying on the theme of abortion, do you think this is a religious issue of our time, the sanctity of life and protecting the life of an unborn child?
It has to do with our theology. Who do we believe God is, and our anthropology? Mm-hmm. What do we believe about the human person? And a strong theology, believing that God made everyone equal, leads to a thriving anthropology, where you have a vision for every person. There's no one that is a waste. There's no one who doesn't have a future and a hope. We're all of extreme, extraordinary value, inherent human dignity, and it's because God gives us that dignity. If we embrace some vision of why people are important that's based off of why we would assign them value, we'll find ways to bring them down. But if it's a brotherhood that is created because of God and what he believes about human beings, then all of a sudden the human person receives protection in every society. One of our ministry friends told me one time that God doesn't have grandchildren. It's a very simple concept, but it's a powerful phrase. If we're all direct children of God, then we have no real right to say that someone else deserves less protection or less welcome in the community.
I love that phrase that you just said, that God has no grandchildren. What's the reception from donors and individuals involved in your community at Center for Arizona Policy? How would they relate to something like that?
I think in this moment, if we just look at Arizona, I think everyone's a little bit stunned that the state constitution has moved in a direction where every life is not protected in the law. So there's concern about that. But I also think that there's this focus now on the importance of individual hearts and minds. At some level, prohibition in the law is not possible unless there's a focus on the real beliefs that people hold. And we're talking about beliefs that inform everyday decisions.
Yes.
Right. So I think there's a lot of openness to that. I've seen a lot of openness to that. And one of the things that we're excited about doing is accelerating partnerships between people who are embracing a holistic view of every life is precious at every stage of life. And that could mean the very beginning of life. It might mean the last season, the last chapters of life. There's inherent dignity for all of us at every step along the way. And when we see people who are making sacrifices, personal sacrifices, to step in and help their neighbors, at any step in that continuum there, that's a pro-life act. It's a pro-life act. Yeah. And we really want to see that continuity be embraced holistically throughout our community along the way. And when it does happen, it will just not be an issue. You won't need to have prohibitions in the law about something like abortion if there's a place where there's an open heart to protecting unborn babies.
Mm-hmm. You know, this conversation today around this issue, I think, is more important than ever because it's on a lot of ballots this next cycle. It's going to be. Also, politicians are often putting on their palm cards, protecting life, protecting the border, protecting gun rights. And I'm now asking myself, let's say we fix all of this. Let's say the border is secure. Life is protected no matter at what stage. Every single American has the right to own a gun. If we fix those issues, what are Republicans going to run on? Do you think they're preventing solutions just to keep the conversation going?
That's always the concern about any political process, is that we boil things down to issues, and all of a sudden the issue label strips away the nuance. Mm-hmm. Someone told me, I had the blessing of working in state government for many years, and someone told me, listen, every decision that we make is going to boil down to the 3 Ps here. It's going to be policy, certainly, but don't think you can overlook the other 2 Ps, which is personalities and people. And I've found that the statesmen that I've encountered, the real leaders, have an ability to recognize that we're people, and when we make these decisions, sometimes we have blind spots, and our blind spot might be toward a policy issue we haven't looked at in the right way. It might be just not understanding that we're not coming across correctly. We're not communicating in a way that is allowing our true point, what we're really trying to say, to be communicated. So the personalities sometimes can get in the way, and then the people side, you can't look at things in the abstract.
Yeah,
you can't. And so one of the things I'm most excited about at CAP is we have something that informs everything that we do, which is keeping an eye on our uniqueness. we are not just a policy shop. We're not a think tank. Mm-hmm. We're more than that. We focus on policy, but we're more than that. And then we were talking about politics, how sometimes sloganism, sometimes issue focus can obscure the real issues. Well, we're not just a political shop either. We're not a political action committee. We have a political action committee, but we're not exclusively just on the policy side. And then we're faith-based. We're Christians. We're fundamentally motivated to be engaged in public life because of who Jesus is to us, and his command to us to love our neighbors. But we're not just a Christian ministry. We're not a church. We're not just a parachurch organization. We happen to be a Christian ministry that's focused on public policy. So we're this beautiful fusion, and that's that brings the uniqueness to it. And we think that we can contribute to political conversation by getting past that very first kind of issue resonance that you're talking about, or dissonance, based off of issues overall. And overall, our goal is lasting social change. It's giving the gift of a stronger neighborhood, a stronger community, a stronger state to the next generation.
Is that how you define social change? Is neighborhood, community, people working together, that's social change?
It has to be. It has to be, right? I mean, how many times have we talked about the disconnect between our nation's capital and the rest of the country? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot more disconnects. When I was working in state government, we'd talk about the disconnect between the great state of Maricopa and everybody else. Mm-hmm. Or we'd talk about the disconnect between metropolitan counties, metropolitan-driven issues, and rural issues. And so, one of the great challenges for all of us is cohesion. And the only way to bring cohesion is to connect as many perspectives as possible and say, hey, have we looked at these issues from enough angles? So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to keep the local issues in sight, the neighborhood issues in sight, at the same time that we're talking about state issues. And the same applies at the federal level. And this is in the greatest traditions of our country, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at any other great nation on earth, and they don't constantly refer to, well, let's keep federalism in mind.
Yeah.
Federalism is a blessing that we have in the United States that doesn't exist anywhere else. The other superpowers of the earth, be they historic or current, they're not concerned like we are about, did the right decision get made at the local level? Mm-hmm. Right? They don't have a true appreciation for, did the right type of government official make this decision, the constitutional separation of powers. But when James Madison wrote about checking ambition in the Federalist Papers, that happens today. It's the real deal. Yeah. It's still happening. You can read about it on the front page of the Washington Post, or you could see it for real in your local school board meeting. I mean, we have a true tension built into our system, but the tension is there for the right reasons because it enables us to make sure that everybody's involved in the conversation.
Yeah, and we talk about tension. There's tension in the White House on this issue. You have a president who is very much pro-life, leading with his faith. But then you have a first lady who has not clearly come out yet of whether or not she is pro-choice, pro-life. She's still kind of there in the middle. What does that say to the 50 states? If there's debate in the White House, there's going to be continued debate among all of us. So how do we fix that? Because I don't think it's leading by example. I think it's the community approach that you're talking about here. But Peter, what do you say when you talk to a husband and wife and the wife was raped and she doesn't want to have this baby and she comes to church on Sunday and she said, I think I'm going to go to California and get an abortion? What do you say to somebody like that?
I remember, the first time I processed this question of sexual assault in connection with abortion, it was a conversation I had with my dad, and I was quite young, but I remember he just asked me, what did the child do? What is it that the child has done that would deserve it to be excluded from the community?
Great question. And that goes back to your point on values.
And that's the core thing is we have to have a vision for accepting every child into the community, regardless of the circumstances of how they were conceived, because they still have inherent dignity that's there. There are some very, very persuasive, very courageous voices out there, men, women who were conceived in rape, and their mothers chose life, and they now have their own kids, because of that. So they, it's a very, very painful circumstance. It's difficult to even imagine moving forward under those circumstances, but you can still give someone life who didn't choose the violence that was the beginning of their life. Yeah. Overall, it reminds me a lot also of the courage I see in survivors of sexual assault, of sexual exploitation. As we're recording this is the week that Congress is voting about giving full transparency to the legal prosecution materials held in the federal government's control about Jeffrey Epstein. Yes. And one of the things that's caught my attention is the number of survivors who went to D.C. this week, re-traumatized themselves. Oh, yeah. For the good of their country, to just basically share that there's hope. Yeah. And who is their audience? Well, I know many survivors. Their primary audience is other victims of sexual assault. They want them to know that there's hope. They want to reach in and into their circumstances and let them know that someone cares about them. And so this is a survivor moment. And I would also say that when it comes to any victim of sexual assault, there's a point in time where the hope is tangible. You can reach out, and it can be your path for the future. And a lot of times that healing comes with helping others as well.
Peter, you recently took over Center for Arizona Policy this year, in fact, from the famous Kathy Herod, a staunch bulldog at the Arizona State Legislature. We've known Kathy for many years, mutual friend of ours as well. What called you to take on this role? Because I know you've been a successful attorney. You have worked with a lot of anti-trafficking, anti-sexual exploitation organizations here in Arizona. But why Center for Arizona Policy? That seems like a big switch, but maybe it's not.
Well, that's a great question. I had to ask myself if it was a big switch. I've been around Center for Arizona Policy for many years, and I worked there before in the past, from 2004 to 2008. In order for everyone to appreciate why you would even use the term switch, we should talk about what I was doing. The last 10 years, I've been focusing as an attorney on protecting vulnerable children and protecting survivors of sexual exploitation. So that's been my primary field. And that's a very specific focus. Yes. It's a sliver of justice that's crucially important to me, but it's very, very specific. And I was even drilling into something even more specific, which is protecting children from online harm. And just how dangerous our connected society has become. And so what I asked myself when Kathy shared that she felt like her season was done and that someone else needed to lead the organization is, would it be a good fit for me? And really, did I have permission from the Lord to change assignments from focusing on my clients and their stories to something that was broader? And one of the things that really gave me comfort that this is the right fit for me and the right season for Center for Arizona Policy is the understanding that, the answer to so many challenges in society is healthy families. Not every family is perfect. No family is perfect. No. And we're headed into the holiday seasons. We're all going to
observe that firsthand.
We're going to observe it firsthand. We're going to experience it at the table, in the card game, whatever it is. But there's something beautiful about this commitment that is strong now and sets the table for future generations, and is the hope for the future. And so I just got excited about doing something that is holistically focused on families again. And because that moves upstream from the specific social pain and the social tragedy that we were dealing with in organizations like National Center on Sexual Exploitation. So that's the specific example. I don't want to say that CAP wasn't making a contribution in that area before. It absolutely was. But it was that uniqueness about Center for Arizona Policy being kind of the tip of the spear to get in there for Christians engaged in public policy and for Christians to contribute to making families healthy in the state of Arizona that got me excited to come back.
Oh, that's excellent. And Peter, you have a relatively large family yourself, several children, correct?
We've been told that it's a large family.
Yes.
We experience it as being it's beautiful. We have 8 kids, and among those 8, just a single daughter. Wow. So if you can imagine someone strong and courageous there. Yeah, there's a lot of testosterone in our home, and I'm proud of all of them. It's a beautiful time for us. Our oldest is 24, our youngest is 10, so we're kind of right in the middle, right in the middle of a wonderful time. But it's the great privilege of life to be able to help as many people as possible get launched, get started, encourage them. And then as a parent, the great encouragement actually happens in reverse. Yeah. It's the way no one can encourage me more than my kids can encourage me. Yeah. Whether they set out to do that or not, that it's that pride that you have as a parent. It's that seeing them overcome challenges. It's an amazing thing. It's really, really amazing. Now, another ministry friend shared with us that this concept of like, in parenting, you've got the front 9 and the back 9. Have you heard this?
Yes.
The analogy to golf. So we actually have everybody on the back 9 now.
So you guys are close.
So we're high-fiving on that.
Yeah, you're about ready.
Yeah.
You're about ready.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ways to go, but it's interesting to be like, okay, we actually have no one else, no more work to do on the front 9. It's the back 9 now. It's the focus.
I love this topic because the American family is making a comeback. I think we had about a decade there where a lot of young people, career-driven, men and women, focused on how am I going to succeed in my life, and they never viewed children as part of that success. I think the birth rate has actually declined in the United States. And with this decline, people's motivations are changing for everything about what they want in their future. But you and I know as fathers who had children with our wives, the family is the cornerstone of everything we do. They come first. If I get a call from my son's school, everything gets dropped and I leave. And I have so many friends that they're not getting that experience because they're still working on Wall Street. They're still at Goldman Sachs. They're, quote, grinding. They're making a lot of money, yes, but I ask them, what are you going to do with all of this at the end of the day? What is it for? Who are you doing this for? I'm a faith-based man as well. My children are baptized. Faith is an important part of our lives. And I think faithful families in America right now are starting to rise up again and speak to a lot of these issues we're talking about. And I think that is a phenomenon because we've had presidents that have not valued families as much. You had Barack Obama and Joe Biden. I think they almost avoided the subject, even though they're husbands and fathers as well. But now we have a president in the White House who has a relatively large family compared to the standard in the United States, which most couples now, I'm seeing, at least some of our friends in their mid-30s, they have 2 kids and they're done. Trump has several. He's bringing that family dynamic back. He's bringing Christian values back. So when you look at that, do you feel that is having an impact on your organization's ability to get things done? Are you guys raising more money? Are you more active in the community? Are people more receptive to you than they ever have been before because of this?
There's a renewed focus on family. There's no question. And it's hard to you hear about the vibe shift. Mm-hmm. This is one of the ways where I think there was this subtle change and all of a sudden it was there. It's okay to really focus on family.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the 80s, the concept of prioritizing family became it became preachy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, everything is on a pendulum. Maybe we got to this extent in the pendulum's arc where, forget about preachy, what is the consequence when we neglect the relationships that are closest to us, when we
Yes.
don't prioritize the relationships that are closest to us? And you and I have talked about how powerful it is that Charlie Kirk would use his voice and suggest to young people, hey, have you assessed your options about when would it be a good time for you to be a dad? When would it be a good time for you to be a mom? Why would you put that off?
I think most people would say, I don't know when a good time is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was one of the things that I started reflecting about just in the last few months, because increasingly you have this conversation with young people, like, when is a good time? One thing I'm really confident about, if you wait till you think it's a good time, you're not going to take the adventure of a lifetime. Yeah. You've got to be intentional about it. And I was with a ministry friend earlier the week who's an ultra distance runner. I mean, ultra distance. And what he was sharing about tackling the long races, I couldn't even get my head around it. Right? I mean, the level of preparation that it takes. But one of the things that really stood out to me is the intentionality. You don't go there unless you are ready to be laser focused and really take it on and overcome the resistance in yourself. And if family's worth doing, then it's worth overcoming the internal resistance and the external resistance, and really prioritizing that and making that happen. And one other thing I'll share is that when we think about family, a lot of times we're thinking about the parenting season when our kids need us most, and that's really crucial. Right now I'm having a chance to see my parents minister to each other. The kids are long raised, out of the home and everything. They're facing health issues, and they're supporting each other. And it's that in sickness and in health side of things, that commitment to each other, it's still going.
Yeah.
They've already raised us. They've already done what they're going to do in terms of demonstrating for our benefit the right way to live. Now they're just living the right way for each other. They're serving each other. They're being intentional about making sure that that they're there just on a daily basis for each other, and that's powerful to watch. And it's made me think about, again, it's that race that the beginning is crucial, but at the end you can still be there. And there's just no other institution in society other than the family where you can see that provided for. I'm going to say one more thing about family just while we're talking about this. There was a phrase for me that stood out in the pandemic that was just something about it. For me, maybe this is where the pendulum about prioritizing family started to swing back the other way. But it was a phrase that maybe Gavin Newsom made it popular.
Oh,
shelter in place. Shut down your life and shelter in place. And it just occurred to me, well, what is in place? Who is in place? What does that mean when your government tells you it's time for you to just stay in place? Well, for a strong family, a thriving family, it means your government is telling you it's time to focus on home. It's time to let the family care for itself. And for people who are in a position where they don't have the family resources available to them, that was a phrase of abandonment from the government. But for a society and for people who had family to be there in place, their place of shelter, their place of hope, it was something that, okay, I understand. My government can do nothing else to help me. My government will do nothing else to help me, but I have the help of my family. And so, that's what kind of stood out to me is that, wow, the family really, it's not just a theory. The family is an institution. And when the government is going to say, all right, everybody, all bets are off publicly, shelter in place. Even the government is recognizing that the institution of the family is primary.
I want to ride that line for a minute, shelter in place, because when I hear that, it's probably the most negative thing I've ever heard, because it was the first time, me being an American citizen in my life, that I saw the government could actually control me and make me stay somewhere. Now, to your point, you're putting a positive light on it, and I will say personally, my wife and I, we decided to drive up to Sacramento, California from here in Phoenix, and we were with my family for 2 weeks during that time, and it was some of the best times because we got to be together. So I see where you're taking a positive angle because I experienced that. But in that same vein, it was the first time I think a lot of people thought, am I living in a communist country where this could happen? And I think it begs the question about health and safety. I've worked with a lot of organizations where they are helping the government define health and safety because that term allows them to retroactively do anything they would like among the American people in the name of health and safety. During the pandemic, there were a lot of states that completely shut down. Their businesses weren't allowed to operate. People weren't allowed to go outside. The whole mask debate, we can go on a whole tangent about that right now, but we won't. Looking at how Arizona behaved during that time under then Governor Ducey, how did you think he handled that situation? Did he have the family in mind, or was he just acting in the interest of the Republican Governors Association, where most of them shut us down?
I can't think of a more challenging set of circumstances for any leader. It absolutely was. And I think that the way public health fits with governance has to be reevaluated overall.
Yes.
That's one of the things that really stands out. Anthony Fauci gets mentioned all the time, partly because he became the figurehead for the public health establishment. But what we learned was the way that decisions are made at the governmental level, whether it's federal or state, needs to be reevaluated if it's going to be, well, this is the best advice from our medical team. And then we drill deeper and we learn afterwards, well, that best advice was as abstract and theoretical and not grounded in public health itself or science itself as anything else. And some of the best ideas about how to weather the storm didn't come from the public health establishment. The thing that I'm most grateful to Governor Ducey for is that he allowed schools to reopen. He didn't require, for example, my children go to a Christian school in the East Valley, and he permitted them to reopen. And he understood that educational communities were going to approach it from different directions, and that it wasn't for Arizona to have a one-size-fits-all approach. And I mean, you were here, you know this. I mean, it was a family-by-family thing about, am I comfortable for my kids rejoining an education environment? But he didn't prescribe this sense of, okay, we now have the all clear from the government, you can go back to school. He left it up to my wife and I to choose a school where we were ready to go back that direction. I think Governor Ducey's leadership, contrasted with our neighbor to the west in significant ways. And just as a lawyer, I look at the comet trail of legal cases after the pandemic, all the case law, and almost uniformly, like all of the strict abuses happened in the California environment, and a lot of the litigation is being evaluated from the lens of what California did because it was so aggressive. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about religious liberty earlier. I can't think of a more significant imposition on religious liberty coming from the government than to say that your ability to connect with co-religionists, with the members of your church, with your neighbors, is now something that's under our control, and we know better about that. And so I think that there's still cases out there where we're going to see that addressed overall. Bodily integrity is still something that needs to be evaluated.
What does that mean, Peter?
It means when the government is going to require specific medical interventions for individuals. And, we saw along with the successes that were happening in terms of coming up to speed quickly with the medical challenge, the first solutions right out of the chute came along with mandates, and mandates that had actual professional impact on you if you didn't go along with them, and we learned some painful lessons about that. But
what were some of those lessons?
Well, the vaccination requirements, the requiring that people be vaccinated and to move forward with certain forms of jobs. And I was blessed to work for an employer at the time that wasn't going to require vaccination, but there were many employers who did, and many employers were just taking their cues from the government. And the government itself was requiring it for, say, our men and women in service. And we now know better, but that was a terrible decision, and it had a major impact. And what we really need to do is recur to first principles. That this is what the Bill of Rights is for. That the government cannot force that kind of a decision on someone, and there were good reasons to wait and just hold off. A lot of the information that came forward about vaccinations ended up not being true, and it was the very rationale for why a vaccination needed to happen. So those are the concerning issues. In the Arizona legislature, Representative Nick Cupper has a lot to share about this because of what he experienced as a military veteran, and he nearly lost his entire ability to move forward with the retirement that he earned and that his family earned because of the vaccination issue. He stood on his rights. He prevailed, and he's an absolute champion for this in the future. I think we're going to hear more about what it means to reevaluate when the government can actually require someone to have a medical intervention, and really that cannot happen again. We can't revisit that chapter.
And do you think that's a religious freedom issue?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
what
it
makes it one?
absolutely does. Well, I have to recur to Jesus. He's my authority on these things. But he talked about the first commandment being loving the Lord with your body, your soul, your mind. And if you don't even have control over your own body integrity, you're not going to be able to give your first duty to God. James Madison gave a description for what religious liberty is. It's the duty we owe to God. We don't owe it to our neighbor necessarily. We don't owe it to the government. We don't owe it to any human authority. We owe these first duties to God. And so this, starting with our control over ourselves, we owe that to God first. And for someone who has a sincere religious belief that they don't want to have a forced medical intervention like that from the government, it absolutely is a religious liberty. It's a sign of religious liberty. By the way, religious liberty is not just for you and I. It's for the people that we're able to help and serve in life. Because that Jesus said that the first commandment is closely related to the second, and the second commandment is love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes, that's right. Peter, obviously, I work with a lot of donors and charitable organizations across the entire country, many of which are center-right or even far-right at times. Earlier today, when I was sort of reviewing your website, my first look is your mission statement with every organization. And a question I get from donors all the time is, okay, I read their mission statement. What does it mean? And what do they actually do? And a lot of organizations have a hard time articulating this. So I want to read it for you first and then ask, tell me what this actually means. You're upholding foundational values of life, marriage, and family and religious freedom. We've talked a little bit about that today, but if you could very poignantly tell me, I'm a donor sitting across from you, I'm willing to give you quite a bit of money to execute this mission. What is that money going towards?
Well, let's take the issues: life, marriage and family, religious liberty. Those are not just any old set of issues. We didn't pull them out of nowhere. Those are the issues that matter most. You can't live in human community without having fundamental protections for human life, the dignity of human life from beginning to end. Without the family itself, the fundamental unit of society, being protected. and families are built on the marriage promise, the marriage covenant. And in the Judeo-Christian tradition, for Christians, this goes back to the very creation of the world, where God explained to the first family, this is the reason why you're no longer going to stay with your parents. This is the reason why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and the two become one flesh. This is the vision for generations of humanity moving forward. It's independent families being set up and moving forward with hope for the future. Marriage and family, it's crucial. It's an issue that matters most before anything else. And we were just talking about religious liberty. It's the first commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. The second commandment is closely tied to that. So those are the issues that matter most, and we accomplish them in 4 different ways. And these 4 things we do always in unison with each other. And that is, we are advancing public policy. We're engaged in the public policy world. Our policy team is one of the most experienced at the Arizona Capitol. We have a combined 50 years of experience being there, being engaged with the big decisions, the small decisions, every relationship. We're very tied to what happens with Arizona public policy. But it's not enough to just do policy work. You also have to focus in Arizona as a direct democracy state on elections. So that's the next thing we do. We affect elections. The simple way of putting it is, in Arizona, our laws and our leaders are always on the ballot. And you could have great leaders that you're happy with now, but the next election cycle's coming, and every 2 years, our laws and our leaders are always on the ballot. So we have to affect elections in order to be effective. The next thing we do out of the 4 is that we are acting with the church. We're Christians, we accept the authority of Jesus, and we think that the best thing we could possibly do is encourage other Christians to see government as a mission field, a place where you would bring the light of Christ, the hope, the joy, the love that he's given you, and you share it with other people. And the main way we do that is we connect the leaders of churches, pastors, with lawmakers, but not abstractly, specifically the lawmakers in their districts. We call this the shepherd-to-shepherd approach. The idea is that the shepherds of the church, at a minimum, need to know the shepherds of government, the leaders that are there. And it's really a peer-to-peer network that develops there. A legislative leader needs to know who the pastor is, the pastors are who lead in their community. So we're happy to do that. And we actually have more meetings about that purpose, just connecting faith leaders with the lawmakers for their district than we do any other purpose. And the final thing we do is we accelerate partnerships with joy. The great joy we have from the standpoint that we have is connecting people who should know each other, connecting organizations that should know each other, connecting leaders who should know each other, and then watching what God does with that. And it's amazing thing. It could mean anything from a new HVAC unit gets donated to a food distribution ministry that wouldn't otherwise happen, but for the connections that we make, to a new law coming forward, and just a vision for how the community can be helped, and taking on something that hasn't been addressed before or needs to be reformed in the law. So there's everything in between, and so it's the policy, it's the politics, if you will, elections. It's the connection between the faith community and government, and it's the partnerships that keep our community together. That's how that mission statement works its way through everything that we do at Center for Arizona Policy.
So the 4 A's, or 4 pillars rather, is kind of what you've created for your organization.
Yep.
So, Peter, when you're talking with donors, is this your pitch? You're giving these 4 A's to them and asking them to invest?
Yes.
And how is that going? How do they receive it?
Well, with excitement, because we're excited about it.
Yeah.
It's something that we're
your demeanor
we're really,
demonstrates that right now.
We're really it's a blessing to be part of, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so glad to have the privilege of being the president at Center for Arizona Policy, because it just occurred to me at some point that these institutions that I think of so much, so often, there are very few organizations that focus on all of them together at the same time. And when I say the institutions, I mean the government, the church, and the family. We're in that unique place where we're always going to be focusing on the relationships between those three institutions. And our conversation has kind of borne that out, the different ways that the government interacts with the family and interacts with the church. It's crucial. This is what makes for a free, vibrant society. So that's the uniqueness of the organization is really what makes us so passionate, and it's just a privilege to be part of.
Christians, when they're in certain conversations, my brother's a very devout Christian. He lives in the Bible Belt of Oklahoma. And we were recently at a wedding, my wife and I was talking about him, the Christian school he works at. We also were talking about the timing of baptizing our second child. And the demeanor of this woman changed entirely. It went from being very engaged, us talking about our kids, about our life, family. And then when I started talking about faith, a switch went off. And you could tell she rolled her eyes. And I kind of whispered to my wife, I was like, what is that about? And we talked about it together later in our hotel room that night. And I think there has been a little bit of an indoctrination across the country of people thinking those with a faith-based background, those who want to have children. Because mind you, the woman I'm talking about right now, she also had her husband get a vasectomy because she didn't want children. So obviously she's not into the family dynamic either, neither with faith. And I'm thinking about that occurrence that happened to us. How often is that happening across the country? And is that the defining line between Democrats and Republicans right now? Is it faith and family? Do they just not agree with that dynamic at all? What are you experiencing out there right now as you're talking to people?
Well, let me start by saying I hope if that is a defining line, I hope it doesn't stay that way. Yeah. It would be a terrible thing for a country that whose politics have been fundamentally two-party for one party to deprioritize or even forsake the importance of the family as an institution or for faith to society. That doesn't work. That is profoundly harmful. So I'm all about, hey, let's. There should be such a thing as a pro-life Democrat.
Yes.
There should be such a thing as a pro-faith, pro-family Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to happen again. So that's a crucial piece. And really, these values that we're talking about or these priorities that we're talking about, they really are for everybody. They're for both parties. And one of the things that gives me hope for the future is the times I have seen men and women on the political left do something that I viewed as profoundly pro-life, even though they weren't pro-life. Let me explain that and unpack that just a little bit. When I talk about pro-life, I'm thinking, of course, about protecting people at the very beginning of life, protecting preborn children. But pro-life is really the whole life time and recognizing that throughout life. And so, for example, I have seen some real courage on the political left to step in and help the victims of sexual trafficking. Powerful leadership, significant leadership. And what goes through my mind is gratitude that's there, that's part of what animates at least part of the left-leaning coalitions in our country. But then this thought that maybe this is a glimmer of hope, that if there is such a thing as a strong, broad consensus about helping the victims of trafficking, about doing something about the asymmetries of power that create trafficking in the first place, maybe that focus could shift to other areas in the human experience, including making sure that every child is welcomed into life. So, that's my reaction when we're thinking about what the distinctions between the parties. Mm-hmm. It's the hope for the future that we could have more shared values and not so many issues that are immediate splinter issues. And you started this particular part of our conversation by talking about the faith side of things. Our worldviews are going to be divisive at some level,
Yes.
right? As a Christian, I'm following someone who said that he is the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't use an indefinite article. He used a definite article,
Yes.
the way, the truth, and the life. And so when I am trying to collaborate, cooperate, and just generally live in harmony with someone who does not believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, my goal is to reflect as much of the love of Jesus as I possibly can, and hope that that's impactful. And our Vice President J.D. Vance had this issue come up,
Yes.
and it was raised to him in an interesting way. It was how do you handle an interfaith marriage and an interfaith household? And what I loved about his response is, we make it work. We talk about these things, and we make it work. It works for us. We love each other, and we have a fundamental bond of love, and it works for us. And there's something about that, the genuineness of instead of just saying, I'm not going to answer that, that's a personal question. It was, we make it work. And so I think that's what we have to, as a community, that has to be our answer too.
Yeah.
We're going to make it work.
Yes.
We're not going to see eye to eye on everything when it comes to a faith perspective, but we're going to have enough shared values that we're going to be committed to making it work.
Yeah, because everyone is welcome in the kingdom of God. I mean, I very much related to J.D. Vance's comments on this, because when my wife and I first met, she was very non-denominational. She grew up in a very, very Christian household. Her parents went to church every Sunday. They were part of Bible study, very devout Christians. And over time, it almost turned her off a little bit. And I remember when we started talking about family planning and having children, the concept of baptism came up. I was raised in the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic school. I went to Sunday school. My parents were not, quote, hardcore to where we need to do everything in Jesus' name, but we had a faith-filled household. And that's something that I've wanted for my family. And so over the years, as with Vance, it wasn't a private issue. This was something we discussed with our families of, are Elisa and I going to baptize our children? And eventually we did. But I think where a lot of Christians and Catholics and many conservatives get things wrong, where that stigma of the woman rolling her eyes at us comes from, is people on the left feel we're trying to convert them. And I don't think that is what's going on right now as a movement. I think it's educating people, advocating on behalf of those values, and really sharing the gospel. That is what I see. And I'd love to see a country where the idea of faith, family, and freedom is something we can all agree with. When we started the conversation, we talked about the platforms people are running on. I'd much rather see everybody just say, I'm for faith, family, and freedom, rather than secure the border, pro-life, and whatever else is the hot topic at the time. Right now is LGBTQ issues. We're battling that across the entire country. But I think that's the stigma going on. And what I want to ask you, Peter, is you are an advocacy organization. You are working on new laws and policies that I see is very in line with the Christian faith, sharing the gospel. When talking to a Democrat and someone who would roll their eyes at finding out you're a Christian-based organization, what do you say to them to help them understand, I'm not trying to convert you?
Boy, that's a tough question in terms of the context of how is the interaction happening. My experience is if the interaction is a one-off, so much harder to genuinely convince someone that you care about them.
Yes.
Right. One of the great blessings for me of working in government was having day-to-day coworkers who were coming from the opposite political perspective from me, and yet we had the shared experience of being coworkers. And so year after year, we were asking each other those questions. How was your weekend? How are your kids doing?
Yeah.
I'm sorry that happened to you. I'll be praying for you. That compounds over time, and you have that sense of community with each other. And all of a sudden, the edge in conversations kind of drops off a little bit. And I notice I become less defensive, and I see less defensiveness in other people if they know that I really care about them. One of the most powerful pictures to me that I can think of in the last, and I'm talking about a real photograph in the last, say, 20 years of American public life, is the picture of the Congressional Democrat baseball team praying for Steve Scalise and the other Republicans who were practicing across town for this annual baseball situation. And there was an assassination attempt. And all they knew was that there was a shooting and that some of their Republican colleagues were in danger and had been harmed. And they had an immediate prayer circle. Someone took a picture of the prayer circle. And that was just so powerful to me because it was a picture of the other tribe, so to speak, the political opposite from where I stood, praying for their counterparts. And it suggested to me that there was community, there was relationship, there was love, there was respect, and there was an appeal to the authority of God to help them. To realize that that someone needs to step in and help, and all I can do is pray for someone. So I just thought that was a beautiful moment, and it was beautiful because it suggested that there's hope and there's a chance.
Yes. But what do you say, Peter? That's what I want to get at. You guys are an organization that is constantly in debate at the legislature and the local communities. There's always going to be differing opinions. That's the great thing about the United States of America. You can have your own opinion. I mean, free speech is a real thing. If you want to hold up a sign that says you want to assassinate the president, you're not necessarily going to go to jail for that. I'll never forget, a scholar at Goldwater told me this, Timothy Sandifer. He said, if someone wants to hold up a sign saying, take down the president, the FBI might be checking that out, but that student's not going to get thrown in jail because they have a right to free speech. So when you're out in that community, you're meeting with people that do not agree with Christian values whatsoever, but they're open to listening to you. What are you saying to them?
I'm with every challenging interaction, my goal is to start with a shared value.
Okay.
And so maybe the lowest common denominator or the easiest graspable denominator is just that there's a belief in human flourishing, and so they have a vision for life, and we disagree profoundly about maybe what flourishing is or how it should be accomplished. But at a minimum, there is a value and respect for human dignity, and we try to proceed from there. I mean, that's the heart of it. And when it comes to sharing my faith and showing that I don't have an agenda of conversion, I think it's more helping them, trying to genuinely show that it's about their welfare and their benefit that I'm interested in. And I don't have any reservations or doubts that what God has done in my life has been for my benefit. And so I don't want to be selfish and not share that with people. And I'll give you an example. There's a wonderful phrase in the Psalms that says that God has removed the trespasses from us as far as the east is from the west. And beautiful ancient poetry. I mean, what a wonderful phrase. It's like Shakespeare. It rolls off the tongue. Trespasses removed from us as far as the east is from the west. Well, one day I read that or thought about that, and I realized that was true about me. Not just this beautiful poetry, part of our great Judeo-Christian tradition, but it was true about me. And it was true about me because of Jesus. And the joy that just filled my heart at that moment, and the relief that filled my heart at that moment, that my trespasses are truly separated from me as far as the east is from the west, that the compass itself is just a picture of how distinct Peter is now, what a new person Peter is because of Jesus. I mean, that was genuinely exciting
Yeah.
for me. And so being able to share what you care about most with people is usually a profound good. And I've had people share with me something that I didn't agree with, but I could tell that it resonated so strongly with them that it was just worth it to hear them share that. And so I hope it gets received that way. And sharing it from a point of enthusiasm versus sharing it from a point of, let me teach you where you're going wrong in life. That's the difference that's there. And all I can say is that it's the rules of the relationship more than the rules of debate that carry those conversations.
And I think when it comes to donors, you guys are a 501c3, so you're out there fundraising. You are receiving investments from individuals who are blessing you with their fortunes. They're writing checks. They're offering grants. And I think what's important that I'd like a lot of donors to understand from this conversation today is human flourishing and human dignity are really at the core of what you are actually doing. When we go beyond values, when we go beyond your mission statement, you want human dignity and human flourishing. And I would think 99.9% of Americans can get on board with that. I know we've talked a lot about life, the sanctity of marriage today. Some people may or may not agree with that, but I think that's okay. If a donor listens to this conversation today, I want them to walk away with the idea that you're worth investing in for more than what is on your website, human flourishing and human dignity. Peter, Arizona is now famously known as one of the first states to have universal school choice. There's several others that have now followed us. School choice to a lot of people means less money for public school teachers. Couldn't be farther from the truth. I've worked in the movement a long time. Public school teachers and public education is still getting money, but parents now have a choice where to send their children. What is CAP doing from an educational freedom perspective?
Well, we're helping the state celebrate its leadership is what we're doing. We've been privileged to have an incredible, connection with the way the state has led on educational issues. And what I'm most proud of about Arizona is that we've broken out of the mindset that developed in the 50s and 60s that education was the exclusive purview of the government and realized, oh no, it's a community concern. It's a family concern. It's primarily a family concern. And the role of the government may be to provide the backstop for education and make sure that everyone at least has access to some form of education, but it is not to choose that for everybody. And Arizona has been a leader. I'm a native Arizonan, but I remember when I was in graduate school studying public policy and the way other states were looking to my home state as the vanguard of educational freedom. It made me proud. And I hope every sitting lawmaker, I hope everyone who has contributed to the fact that 10% of our school-age children are right now experiencing the blessings of some form of school choice, whether it's open enrollment or charter schools or a private Christian school through an ESA. Homeschooling. All of these things are options that are not just accepted, they're welcomed in the law because of a commitment to the principle that education is not just a government question. It's really up to parents to decide what the education and upbringing of their kids will be overall. Let me give you just one example. There are Christian schools right now in Arizona that have only been around for a few years in zip codes where the vast majority of adults have not graduated from high school, let alone college. Almost no college degrees in these areas. And just think about that. This is not just the American dream. This is the American dream with a delivery of generational impact, complete transformation of a family's experience. You have parents who are participating in the economy from a standpoint of not having received just the basic fundamentals of education, and their children are able to have a education that delivers on the educational promises and also is aligned with their values. That's a powerful, powerful thing. And so I'm excited about that. The statistics show that about 60% of the families that are using the ESA program, the scholarship accounts, are middle-class families. So this is something that has brought the option of a private education to everybody. We're at 95,000 families that use the ESAs right now. That's only going to grow from here, and it's for the betterment of our state that it would grow.
And what is CAP doing to ensure that the number of families grows? Are you guys advocating more people sign up for ESAs? I know Governor Hobbs right now is trying to take it away. She has been for quite some time. We'll see what happens in this next gubernatorial election if she's reelected. Yeah. But, in my mind, there still is this ongoing debate of, is school choice siphoning money away from the public school system? And to your point, public school is not for every child. If you have a child with special needs, if you're a child of a military family and you're going to different bases and you have to continue changing schools, maybe online school is better for you. I'm very open to the concept of parents picking whatever course of education is the best for their child. But what exactly is CAP doing on that issue?
Yeah, it really boils down to three things. First, it's sharing the truth, the stories that matter about how educational freedom lifts everybody. And this is one of the things that I think during the pandemic had an impact of activating a lot of parents, and one of the ways was school. The options that were given to them or removed from them were so shocking that they realized, hey, I got to be my own advocate in this situation. I've got to find other options because the way my district is handling this is just not appropriate. And so it helped a lot of families get started on their own journey. So sharing some of those success stories, in my own family, we have some learners that our kids are learning at a different rate. Mm-hmm. They have unique needs, and a district school was not going to get the job done for them. And so it's been a blessing to be able to educate our own kids in Arizona. So sharing those stories. The second thing is advancing leadership that is going to share the good news about school choice and not embrace or re-embrace the bureaucratic impulse. The bureaucratic impulse is, hey, let's regulate this more. Let's put guardrails in place. Let's just make sure that this program, is run by the experts. The experts are the parents that are choosing ESAs for their families, and the leaders and the people stepping forward to lead, that believe that the parents are the experts and will trust them first, are the ones that deserve the mandate of support from our perspective. And then the final thing is this is the primary issue that drives elections in Arizona. It's the primary issue.
This is very true.
This is the legacy of Arizona that's at stake. And you just look at the office of governor, look at the office of attorney general. You have one vision, which is to return education back to the place where the government chooses everything, and to restrict access for families to school choice. Or you have the vision of let's stay in a position of leadership where we're turning this issue, this crucial function, over to parents to move forward. And so we're focusing on who gets elected to the state legislature, and we're focused on who gets elected to statewide office, because this is really what will drive the success, the hope, and the future for Arizona.
So making sure certain political players get into office to advance educational freedom. That's what you're doing on this issue.
100%.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Peter, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining the American Conversation.